If there's one man who can help, if there's one man who can help, it's the man coming in here right now.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode, one of the last ones probably, of the Fullmetal Alchemist fan guide for the 2003 anime series, Fullmetal Alchemist, all part of something I've been doing which is Fullmetal Fridays, all part of a podcast made Full Metal. Roughly I've been going through the series of the original anime because it's one of my favorites, but I hadn't watched the whole thing straight through in a long time, so I decided to kind of try to match up. If we include the movie, it's about 52 episodes, 51 episodes plus movie for about 52 weeks in the year, so I thought that would roughly match up. So I tried to release these every Friday around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, though sometimes I miss a week or two here or there just due to scheduling, and I might record reviews of a couple episodes within one episode of this podcast. Well, this one was a doozy, people. Episode 49, The Other Side of the Gate. Our synopsis for this episode is Envy basically has taken Al right back to Dante and their hidden city underneath Central, but Ed's on his way because he got help from the fake Elric brothers, kind of because there was a lead from their father, like of the alchemist that kind of lured him to make the red water, and that basically leads him back down into the city. And Dante reveals who she is and reveals her full plot, and is basically pretty much saying what we all kind of suspected, that she's going to transfer her soul into Rose's body using the Philosopher's Stone, which is now with Al as a conduit. And really just to kind of mess with him, she sends Ed through the gate of truth, and he actually finds himself in this city in a world very similar to our own, with Hohenheim there, who doesn't seem to recognize him at first, but then he quickly realizes who he is as the place is being bombed. Looks like it might be a world war or something. Well, my overall feelings for this one, I will say it had a couple minor stumbling things that stuck out to me for some reason for these couple episodes. Al's line read in the dub, I didn't think was the best. What he's talking about, there's so many times I should have died, why did I deserve to live? Generally, I think that Fullmetal Alchemist has a pretty good dub. I don't know what people's opinions are. I mean, I feel like when this came out, this was like kind of when Funimation was really, getting into their stride with their in-house dubbing, with Fullmetal Alchemist, their flagship show. And I think it is a really good dub. But I feel like voice acting has come a long way. And I haven't really talked about the voice acting so far for this. I do think generally the voice acting has been very good. But the child actor for Bradley's son, I didn't think, or the person doing the voice for it, wasn't necessarily giving the as good performances. I feel like have been consistent. Like, it's not something I've noticed, but for some reason, just a couple of them, for Al and for Bradley's son, they didn't seem like the best line reads. I'm not sure why, but kind of minor, but it was like the first things that opened up, so kind of threw me off slightly. As far as the rest of the opening of the episode, I really liked Bradley's moment with his son, giving him the gift for his birthday, which is kind of finding ways to flesh out this character more with his attack, and I love that voice acting performance, because there's something so charming about Bradley, but there's just that menace underneath. It's just a powerful force you don't want to mess with. And I mean, I always really liked Bradley long before Brotherhood. I mean, I feel like he was always a homunculi that people liked, mostly because it was like the twist with him of being the Führer, but also seeming like kind of a fairly nice, benevolent leader who has that fatherly appeal and demeanor, and then turning out to be like he's this kind of just another, terrible, monstrous guy who, of course, will reveal also has some human characteristics, his love for his son here, but still, I feel like with Brotherhood, that there's just so much of the badass action factor that goes along with the fight scenes that it's interesting. I feel like, to me, Bradley was always an interesting character, even though we didn't really know him too much. Most of what we knew was kind of a facade with his humor, but even here, there's those little bit of elements that are really fleshing him out. Also, Azumi's still being attacked by Archer, who is now the cyborg now. And apparently he kind of revealed what I was wondering when I think I last mentioned it in the previous episode, Like, what's he doing? Is he working with the homunculi? Is he working with Bradley? Apparently, he's got his own men that are all just attempting their own takeover. So he's just completely skipping any subterfuge and is like, nope, I'm a robot now, and I'm gonna go try and take over the country myself. So he's doing his own thing. It kind of reminds me of the Scouring of the Shire by Saruman in Lord of the Rings towards the end of the book. I've had Lord of the Rings just on the mind lately, and it's kind of interesting. You've got this big overarching plot, and there's kind of this little thing, this little guy. He's kind of just a bad guy for his own reasons, and those are some of the villains that interest me the most. Like, they're kind of adjacent and somewhat important to the plot, but just kind of doing their own thing. Like a minor antagonist with a minor subplot. So it's somebody he has a lot of hatred for the Elrics, but Azumi specifically. So I don't know. I find that kind of enjoyable. I also like how from plot points and thematically things are coming full circle because Ed actually used the Fedek Elric brothers to use them as a lead to find out where, his dad ultimately was, from their dad being led by this mysterious alchemist to start creating the red water. So it's kind of interesting that, I think I maybe sort of I may have said some not so great things. I actually don't remember having recorded that episode a while ago. Like, I remember the fake Elric brothers was something that I found to be kind of annoying as in terms of just like, okay, beating the themes over and over again. But it's interesting that they kind of were brought in and they have their own character beats and their minor part in the plot, which I found interesting. Like, it did still tie into one of the old plot points, and even things that seem filler-ish in the show, they are used. So they don't really waste anything plot-wise in this series, which I like. Another little thing that kind of annoyed me, though, was that Ed tells them not to come with him, and I was just irritated that they didn't go with him, and like, why? That's reasoning seemed very annoying. Like, he could have even had a line more about how he felt like it was his responsibility and he needed to do it alone. That's a pretty classic thing for heroes to say. Or he's simply just worried they'd get hurt, and maybe he'd try to block the opening because he's such a skilled alchemist to prevent them from coming after him. But honestly, considering the threat that he's going to go up against and the fact that I know it, the audience knows it, and he probably knows it, he probably could get all the help, that he needs, So I feel like, both these kids could probably actually help him. Although, in all honesty, I don't know if they would make it. But, I mean, I don't know. I think the reasoning for it, once again, like a couple little things in this episode, could have been handled a little more smoothly. And I just thought they could have used another line or two there. Maybe just trying to save on animation for other things coming up in the episode. But I thought that was an odd handling of that. Also, another plot point here, just something that stood out. A lot of little things stood out to me in this episode. Sheska really in this show is much more important, has a lot more really good moments than I previously realized. Her conversation with Winry just about how the homunculi are keeping people away from the stone and how that might be a good thing, kind of preventing the sins of humanity, which is another theme that keeps coming up, and preventing the worst human nature by scaring them off and really almost drawing the worst people to the stone, or the weakest people maybe is implied. And Winry's like, well, I don't know. Them kind of like fishing for people also kind of maybe brings more people to try and do these terrible things. So they had a really strong conversation with a lot of emotion behind it, which I thought was conveyed well. I will admit, even for an anime and even for Fullmetal Alchemist, that particular scene was a bit on the nose, as all these conversations are a little bit heavy-handed sometimes with the themes. But that one stood out a bit because it's obviously tying into what the rest of the episode is going to be like. But it was still a good conversation. And I'm just like, Sheska really must have been a favorite of the writers because she's such a good character. And I feel like I just wrote her off as comic relief thinking back about the show. Like, I liked her. She had some good scenes, but she's kind of integral to the plot and the investigation with Hughes and some insight into things because she and Winry knew about the conspiracy with the homunculi. They know quite a bit. So, yeah, she's a really important character. I don't know if she's underrated, but I like her. I really do. Yeah, I have to say this episode was also filled with more experimental elements. There's some really creepy shots. They've got like I think it's the fisheye lens or wide angle lens effect for the horror when Ed's really shocked by some of the things he's hearing and seeing. There's a lot of great color, that red tinge with lighting effects on the church, which is cool, and in the ballroom underground. They've got the camera kind of twirling as Dante and Ed are having their conversation. As far as the hidden city being found, I did think it was cool, but it could have used a little more buildup, I think, in the episode, because they're just kind of there, like a couple steps, and it's just underneath the town. Like, I mean, I know there's powerful alchemy involved, but I feel like the structure of the ground would cave in. There's a big cavern, like a big cavern. I mean, I'm not a geological expert, but I don't know. I feel like it should have been a longer journey. I know some people complain a lot about the pacing of the episodes in the show, but this is one of the few times where I'm like, I think this could have used an extra episode, because the atmosphere is something that the show is usually very good at, and it does have a lot of good moments in this episode. But for the actual just reveal of the city was not quite as bombastic as I thought it could have been, and actually I thought it was a little underwhelming, which surprised me. I liked the concept, and I obviously knew it was coming, but I thought it could have been built up a little more within the pacing and structure of this episode. Dante kind of just reveals who she is and pretty much drops her whole philosophy on Ed, kind of shatters his viewpoints on an equivalent exchange, and just saying, that it's kind of all nonsense, and, it's just a lot of chaos, and kind of gives her the right, she thinks, to do anything she wants, and use people as tools for her nefarious acts, just do really horrible things because, why not, essentially. Mike's right. And even putting that even putting that baby in danger, like using it kind of for the transmutation she's got to do, and just like casually, having it in the jaws of this transmuted freaking snake monster she made from like the floor, and just like to prove her point, like, the world's not really fair. I could kill this baby, and what's going to be, gotten out of that? Nothing. I can do it just because I can. It's just, some of it rings kind of true. And there is an element, of course, that, twinges at Edward's viewpoints, because he's been so staunch to his philosophy, his beliefs, that make things make sense, but sometimes they don't. And so that's always the villain kind of using that as an excuse to really lean into the worst. So maybe some similarities to Kimberly, perhaps. Although I think that, actually kind of similar. But that whole conversation was really interesting. But I thought the part where, the baby is kind of just plummeting down and Ed catches the baby, that was kind of like a moment that makes you gasp with tension. They were trying some of those camera movements. And I will say that it's really, I kind of was building up to it, but this episode really just hits you with how Dante is so creepy, and I really wanted to curse. She's evil. She's so evil, and the voice actress just does such a good job of conveying that with just that syrupy, just that quality to her voice, and she's just like taunting Ed constantly. It's just, and the fact when she's talking to Rose, there's some really creepy things, like she almost wants to like think of her as something she can consume, and it's just, she says some stuff that just went over my head years ago. It's just creepy. I mean, the whole body swapping thing, and her declaring herself as kind of the protector of humanity, because kind of obviously paralleling what Sheska and when we were talking about, she's kind of using it as an excuse, like, by drawing these specific alchemists to make the stone, I'm just kind of keeping the stone away from everyone else. I'm the only one that can use it, basically, preventing other people from using it. She has this real disdain for people, for human beings. And it's like, you're human too, don't forget that. And she's like, well, am I really, human anymore? Like, I'm not. So she thinks she's like above it because she can go beyond what humans can do. And hopping from body to body, she's this disembodied spirit. And he literally makes the point, you lose a piece of yourself every time you do that. Once again, the stone, which is this big, kind of skippable, kind of loophole, apparently, does have its costs. And the fact that she's losing a bit of her soul, like, it's not just the body was wearing away more and more, it's almost implied like she's losing part of what makes her human within somehow. And maybe that's contributing to just her lack of empathy for other people. It's literally making her just less human, which I'm just thinking of now as a bit of a contrast, because this is the idea popping up again. One of the big themes of the show is the concept of what it means to be human, and kind of tying that in with the physical and what the ramifications are of changes and how we view humanity and what really is most important about an individual, beyond just the physical limitations or any kind of disability or even something as simple as cultural differences or perspectives. So once again, a lot of stuff going on there. But another little note that I really wanted to say that was nice, actually, one of the few actually like really nice episodic moments is that, Edward is a really good character, and for his flaws, he is a really good guy. He's a good kid, and I really like that moment where Rose is really out of it because she's been basically drugged or something by Dante, dancing around really creepily, and she's just and Dante's kind of been like just feeding these ideas into her head, just toying with her because she's so traumatized by everything. Rose just like says, I love you, Ed. And there's that moment where Ed is like taken off guard by it because I don't know, maybe he has some feelings for Rose, but he catches on within seconds because he's like, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's a pretty weird situation. So he does get taken aback, but he's like, no, I don't think you know what you're saying. You're a bit out of it, but we're friends. I care about you. And I just thought that was great, like the romance in this show isn't really there too much. I mean, there's obviously some stuff with Winry that's hinted at a little bit, but they don't really dive into it too much. And Rose is almost kind of hinted as kind of leaning that way, but Ed's like, no, not really. And it's just a very nice, sweet moment where he really cares about this woman, and it doesn't obviously like lean into that. It was just kind of refreshing because a lot of times they could have easily gone that direction, and it's obviously I don't think Ed was going to take advantage of or anything because he's a good character, he's a good protagonist hero, but it's just a really nice human moment that I think says a lot about his goodness as a person. It was just, and the fact that he really cares about her, and I just find that so refreshing to have a friendship or a bond between a man or a woman. Without it being overly romantic or anything. It's just nice. So I think that says a lot to his purity of character. Just a good guy, Ed's a real gentleman in the typical chivalrous terms, I guess. But yeah, Dante initiates the transfer to the gate, and really that's when Ed wakes up in the other world during the bombing raid, which just comes up as a crazy like just like a whoa, like very very. Just seems like kind of off the wall and really just kind of messes with your head a little bit, something to really consider. His dad's there, and it's interesting that moment where he first ignores the questions of where he is and, oh, like, what are you talking about? And Hohenheim's like, you're just acting strangely, as if he might not really be his dad, but then he kind of makes some subtle little hints about things, and Hohenheim's like, wait, do you know anything about transmutation? And you're like, what's going on? He's acting like he knows what he's talking about, but he doesn't. So just really kind of surreal, weird, almost get like this time travel, dimension hopping vibe. Obviously I know what's going on, but, I thought it was really cool. And even though it does feel out of nowhere, and I remember just thinking about my old reviews and discussions about the series, because it's been so long since I've watched it all the way through. I've always remembered that the ending of this series is kind of where I start to have more problems. And I will say this, the last couple episodes have been, there have been like a lot of really good moments. There have been some really good moments, but this one was a little uneven, and I'm wondering if it's still going to feel that way, where this whole other dimension with the equivalent exchange for the gate and where they draw the energy from, how I'm going to feel about that afterwards, I'm not sure. Like it does feel kind of left field at the moment, but I still really like it because it's shocking, like especially after the big reveal about Dante and her motivations and her interactions with Ed. It was just so heavy and sinister, and it's like it's just dropping all these extra just feelings of tension and stakes, with Al and everybody in the balance. You've got so much going on with Bradley and Mustang's plot, and freaking Archer as a robot attacking Izumi, and there's so much going on, and but I still it's adding on. It made me feel intrigued, so I'm not mad about it yet. Another little thing I wanted to mention, because there is a lot to unpack here, and like I said, watching this episode alone gave me a couple ideas for some actual analysis, character discussions, and video essays, or whatever you'd like to say. Just I was thinking like, wow, there's some stuff I did not think about, which I think is a mark of a good show, like the things that have been refreshed. But I loved how Dante is talking about how she's kind of thinking humans are beneath her and she hates them and she's kind of above them. And she's manipulative. She keeps telling the homunculi that, hey, you're not human. Stop acting like it. She's, teasing them with being human, but is really just like, you shouldn't really want it almost. And she's berating all of them for having emotions. So it's interesting, the homunculi, who've been considered to be these monsters throughout the whole show, they're really pawns of somebody who's a much bigger monster, who happened to be basically just a human, who really just, wanted immortality and wanted to use people for power and to kind of as a sick revenge against somebody who slighted her. Like, it's really petty, but it's just like, it's just really disturbing. And meanwhile, it's interesting that, to me, that the homunculi are all actually showing more human emotions again. I mean, despite everything Dante's saying, and maybe they're more human than we think, which Josh could kind of briefly mention. I mean, Envy says something really interesting where he just says he hates the humans and just loves causing them pain. That's really what he's in this all for. He doesn't really care about the master's plans. It's just an excuse to basically just commit these horrible acts. So Envy is driven by hate, and Wrath at this point is just overwhelmed by sadness and just wants Sloth back. That's all he can think about. Just like, the little kid that's lost his mother again. And Gluttony is tragically heartbroken over lust. Like, Gluttony is such a simple character, but there's just so much emotion that is conveyed, so much sadness. And I've been thinking, really, his character in this anime, it really is, he's kind of tragic because, you'd think, oh, he's such a simple character. Even that has such an impact because he and Lust have been so close. They've been partners, they've been friends throughout since the beginning of the show. They were kind of like the introductory villains with Envy in a lot of ways. And we've seen their bond, like they had a trust for each other. And so he is totally lost without that connection, that kind of human, personable connection with another being, another person. So, yeah. So it's interesting. I think I might know what happens, but I wonder if Dante's lack of humanity may be her undoing because she's ignoring the humanity around her. So, So yeah, lot to pack with this episode. I'm gonna leave it probably with a 9 because I think it's very, very good. There's a lot going on, but like I said, the reveal of some things could have been done a little smoother. And like I said, with the dub at least, some of the delivery kind of bothered me with a couple scenes. But I'll leave off with my favorite Full Metal moment. There are really too many to count, but I'm going to say probably just the conversation with Dante and Ed between them. There was just so much to unpack there that, like I said, it just made me think, wow, I gotta do another video probably about Dante and some of these homunculi and some of these themes, because I know it's stuff that I probably have talked about in the past, but I don't know. A lot of it was very fresh, and a lot of little subtle things in the writing and the performances that I don't know if I picked up on before. So yeah, really good stuff. So that is this episode, the review for that. That means we're almost to the finish line here. I think I'm going to try and do reviews of the final 2 episodes in what will be I guess the second to last podcast, because I'm going to do something special for the movie, although I don't know if I'm going to do the typical format for that yet of this podcast. But yeah, I'm almost done. Probably only one more recording to go, 2 more episodes, 1 more episode of this podcast maybe. So yeah, let me know your comments if you have any thoughts about the stuff I ranted about on here. If you like this episode, what you're excited about for the ending, my thoughts on it, anything I may have missed you might want to bring up. Really good episode, really cool. I'm excited to finish it, and kind of sad that it's almost over. I mean, they throw a lot of plot at us there and a lot of new concepts kind of right at the end, and I don't know if it's going to fully satisfy me. I know that's like the one issue that I admit I've always kind of had with this particular show. So we'll see. I do know there are some really good moments coming up there definitely, but we'll see. We'll see. Wow. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.